Welcome back. Well, yes, it's Christmas Eve, but unfortunately, some events occurred that left a sour taste in the mouth of many. And that happened in Kogi, Kaduna, and Kwara states, which led to the death of no fewer than 30 people. In Kogi, an accident involving two luxury buses, both conveying a total of 55 passengers to different destinations, claimed 15 lives after a collision. The State Commissioner of Police, who you see there, Mr. Ede Ayuba, attributed the accident to wrongful overtaking and sleeping while driving. Then he says road mishaps could have been avoided if motorists adhered to road regulation and maintained the stipulated speed limit while driving. But then, in a related development, at least 12 persons have been confirmed killed and 25 others injured after a vehicle accident along the Kaduna-Abuja highway. Eyewitnesses say the crash, which involved a trailer, was caused by a combination of speeding, road defects, driving against the direction of traffic, and loss of control. The Kaduna State Commissioner for Internal Security, Mr. Arwan, did visit the scene and said the trailer veered off the road pavement and overturned due to overspeeding. Then he went on to explain that 12 persons were killed in the crash, while 25 others were injured and are currently receiving treatment in the hospital. He also said that several livestock also perished in the accident. Well, certainly that is not what we want to hear or see this festive season, just Christmas Eve. But yes, we are joined by Mr. Bubi Oyeyemi, who is the Corps Marshal of Federal Road Safety Corps. Good morning and thank you for joining us. Well, your work is usually, at least it goes up notch in terms of what needs to be done during this period. But one would have thought that with COVID, you think there'll be a lot more caution. Maybe people will try to restrict themselves and not be on the roads. What kind of information do you have at the moment concerning what's happening on our roads?
Thank you very much. Good morning. We have experienced unprecedented increase in vehicular density within the last 5 days, which is very unusual. And like those clips you showed, is the data is correct. And we also experienced one road traffic crash at Jeba yesterday, in which a tanker, the brake failed and ran into a ditch, and there was the product spilled, and 6 people died, and about 30 houses burned. These are the challenges during the Yuletide season, and if you look at all these issues, it still borders on what we've been talking about on speed. The one in Kaduna was driving against the traffic. All the dividers, all the median barriers were removed overnight. Every day we blocked all this because construction is going on. And recalcitrant drivers will remove the barriers and to face oncoming traffic. This is what we've been experiencing there. The stubbornness of the drivers. And the one that happened at Zaria Giokini, it occurred at night. That was, and like you rightly said, it was fatigue. And that is why the advisory note is for people not to travel at night, because the stress involved at night is another major thing. The system, the body cannot really take this. It's a challenge that we have raised the alarm. Increase in vehicular density during this Yuletide season, and we need to just sustain this. You've said it, 15 deaths, Lokojan, 6 at Jeba, that's 21 plus 12. 21 plus 12 will give you 36. That means 3 crashes, we've lost 36 people. That's a challenge, but again, the control measures are coming up more. If we can get all those barriers on Kaduna roadblocks, all those required interventions are done, and the recalcitrant drivers don't remove them and face their normal lane. Lane indiscipline is the major problem. And I believe the other issues has to do with the security, which the security agencies have really had the level of the security on the highways, which I can confirm this. I've been on the road now for about 3 weeks. We believe that with all the measures put in place, and what we require mostly is the patience on the part of the road users. Everybody
Dr. Yemi, if you could just speak to one thing before you go into those advisories. My apologies. Before you go into those advisories, you've listed two things. Well, you've mentioned two causes of road traffic crashes. By the way, we'll come to that nomenclature later. You've talked about overspeeding. You've talked about lane indiscipline. And you also just now mentioned fatigue. In an earlier interview in the first quarter, I think you talked about overspeeding being responsible for something in the region of 50% of the accidents that are on our roads. It has increased to 52. Increased to 52. Wow. So 52. How have we been able to deal with all of these, especially given, that these issues are not new? Increased from 50 to 52 now, 2% increase, that's significant. We'll come to the stats later, but how have we been able to deal with them? What else do we do other than just these advisories?
No, it's not only advisories. During the Yuletide season like this, we put up what we call the advisory notes, which you know. But again, we've been enforcing in the issue of speed. The commercial vehicles were directed to install the speed limiting device. And for the operational order I authorized for this period, the installation of speed limiting device is one of the critical issues. The roads are getting better. That is why. And the drivers, the level of driving, the speed is increasing. The people are not so patient again. So it's a major challenge. And that is why we, on commercial vehicles, that is the buses, the articulated vehicles, the issue of speed limiting device is very critical. And I've directed the men, if you don't have appropriate speed limiting device installed in the vehicle, they may have to rest in it. I agree with what you are saying. Then the issue is at night when the dividers are put on the way and the drivers go and remove it to force their way to be taken to face oncoming traffic, and that is part of the lawlessness. And we are battling with aggressive drivers nowadays. The assault on our personnel, the aggressiveness is unprecedented. This is still part of the fallout of the NSAS, and we are yet to get out of it. It's a major issue. The third one has to do with this fatigue. The advisory, I cannot stop people from driving at night. I can only advise. So that's why I said it's an advisory note. Fundamental rights comes in there. If I stop people from traveling at night now, I'll be taken to court for violation. But I can only advise and guide them. Like the luxury buses is a rule that you must have 2 drivers when we are moving on a long distance. And when this one is not done, it's a violation again. We've taken note of all this, and we continue to sustain the enforcement level. We continue to sustain the engagement level. And again, we need to, the fleet operators and the drivers themselves, they need to ensure that the compliance to the traffic rules and regulation must be paramount. I'm a bit worried when I see the figures you have reeled out. These are lives. These are lives of road users. 15 plus 6 and again plus 12. These are lives. It's not just mathematics. It's not just money. So we need to be extremely careful, and we need to get things done rightly. If road users can comply with the traffic rules and regulations, I think it'll be much better. We sustain this enforcement because now we've seen the trend. As the roads are getting better now, we need to re-strategize and refocus on the level of patrol activities.
Okay, because I was going to pick up on that part where you said the roads are getting better. Some people will think that maybe that's why they're having it. But yes, of course, we always like good roads. So, but we have to do a lot more to ensure that people don't, misuse whatever opportunities they have. But there was something that I did notice several years ago about what we see in parks. And that's why there are several facets to your job and road users. Now, in the parks, many of them, you need to see what happens. And of course, I know FRSC is aware of this as well. They drive under the influence. So when they leave the parks and get to the streets, that's why you see them acting in funny ways in terms of the commercial ones. What kind of work are you doing now? Because I remember several times you have done some things about trying to see how to enforce or ensure that they don't drive under the influence. What kind of success are you having in that regard?
Well, thank you. Like I said, there's a level of improvement in respect to, as I'm talking to you now, all over the Federation, there are motor park campaigns going on. There are visitations to the fleet operators terminals. So we've been able to a certain level enforce this issue of driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol. But again, it's a sustained matter. We are getting the cooperation of NURTW, WRTAN, but we need to just sustain this. It's a success story to a certain level. But the challenge we have is when they take off in the morning and they get to the next town where they eat, the issue of fatigue, when they take heavy food, it impairs the level of driving in the afternoon, because most of the crashes we record from the data you showed previously now was between 12:30 in the afternoon and 5:45 in the evening. And it's because that is when they've had a break, they've taken heavy food, and some of them, again, take some level of alcohol. So we've been able to sustain this by using the breathalyzers, but we need to just up this campaign, which we are doing. We continue to sustain this. And the union, too, must do more. They say the control of the parks has to do with the local governments. In Lagos State, we had a success story, and in some other states also we had success. The local governments must make bylaws that outlaws the sales of alcohol at motor parks. I cannot make laws. I can only enforce that by using alcoholizers. But we need more support from the local governments who are controlling the parks to ensure that alcohol is not, and drugs and alcohols are not sold. We've had joint collaboration with now Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency, and we're also, in the first quarter of next year, I want to bring in NAFDAC on board. Again, NAFDAC and NDLEA, so that we can have, the three of us can be able to do something. The driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol has caused so many loss of lives. We need to sustain this. This campaign must be sustained, and we need the cooperation of the media to continue to drive it, to drum it into the ears of all the road users on this. We sustain these efforts. I agree to your observation. It's not down again. It's still on. It's been implemented.
Okay. Well, Doctor, these figures that we're showing for quarter one and quarter two, of course, we had very, very high figures in quarter one, as we previously showed. 3,947 road traffic crashes, ascribed to your organization. And in the second quarter, 2,080 road crashes between April and June. So my question here, with all these figures, quarter one is very high, quarter two is also significantly high. How did that happen when we were supposed to be on a lockdown?
Well, if you do comparison with that of last year, it's not frightening. It's not frightening. One, when you say a figure is high, you must have a comparative analysis. One, the country has 204,000 kilometers of road network, a vehicular density of 12 million. We have the 204,000 kilometers of road network. The federal roads about 36,000, the state roads about 34,000, and the local government roads about 129,000. And we are talking about a population of 203 million. When you look at this, then it's not as frightening as you tend to raise this. But you must have a comparative. The comparative is that you look at 2019 and 2020 and what are we projecting. Then we have strategic goals for the year to reduce fatalities by 15% and to reduce crashes by 15% and fatalities by 25%. The question is, to what extent have we been able to do this compared to the other one? And again, if you are talking about the lockdown in the second quarter, that is when at the peak of COVID-19, the lockdown is, as not all the areas did experience the lockdown. It is the areas that were, and that people were still traveling despite that. They were still moving. And most of those crashes occurred at night. So that is just the explanatory note I must give you. So, but if you compare this data with that of last year, there's a slight increase of about 4%. But again, it's not as frightening. What we need to do, the roads are getting better gradually. We need to go back more to the issue of full enforcement, which we have worked on for next year. Now it's going to be full enforcement. We have procured more radar guns now. We have more equalizers now. So that is what I've authorized to be deployed now to all the motor parks before the driver leaves the parks now. They must be tested at various points on the highways. There are help areas for this end of the year patrol activities. There must be periodic checks on the drivers to ensure that they're not driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol. We just need, we are refocusing our strategy for next year as the roads are getting better, because from, like I told you, speed accounts for 52% from the 50% again of the principal causes of road traffic crash. So we need to continue to up our enforcement and our intervention in controlling the speed of these commercial vehicles and trucks. The crash that occurred on Abuja-Kaduna Road was due to speed on the part of the driver, articulated vehicle, and he lost control. The one that happened at Jeba, which I also mentioned, was the issue of speed. And the third one, even the one that occurred at dead night, the 2 luxury buses that occurred at night, was also as a result of speed. And we are battling for all these articulated vehicles. One of our challenges, if you have looked at what our engagement with stakeholders, we are battling with aged vehicles. And again, most of these articulated vehicles are not designed for the purpose which they are being used for. Many of them are not designed. The tractors are not designed for it. And this is beyond the call. One, the vehicle inspection system in most of the states is not thorough. The states, the vehicle owners just pay and they just issue them roadworthiness. And you agree with me that most of these articulated vehicles, they are not fit to be on the road. But we need a systemic approach towards this. If I impound all these ones now, all these articulated vehicles, it will lead to problem, social economic challenges. But our engagement now with GMD and NPC and the Director, Department of Petroleum Resources, there's going to be auditing of these vehicles next year. And we're going to then it's been agreed by February ending, all the tankers must have installed the safety valves. There are a lot of interventions are going on, which I want to assure Nigerians and the road users that before the end of first quarter next year, there'll be a lot of improvement. And I must also thank Mr. President for his approval in providing additional funds for us to procure more equipment to tackle this, which all these things will materialize in the first quarter of next year.
Those were some of the concerns people have concerning whether you succeed or not. They thought, for instance, if you arrest vehicles that were or trucks that are not latched because of who might own it, they could call someone somewhere and then they make your work a lot difficult. And those are the bottlenecks that people anticipated that you were going to face. What are you going to do in that regard?
If you're talking about unlatched containers, you should commend us for the efforts made so far. Remember the series of crashes involving unlatched containers in the third quarter of this year and the prompt action the court took, especially with the Lagos State government, joint efforts. Now, I just left Lagos over the weekend. At least all the containers I saw were properly latched. It's an improvement because with joint efforts with MPA, it's compulsory now before you leave the ports to latch the containers. And I can say this is a success story too. Channels was involved in that study. And I can tell you now that we've tried on this, we've sustained this. And there is a special team at the former Lagos end of the toll gate to ensure that any articulated vehicle, those flatbed trailers that the containers are not latched, will not be allowed to move. And we've sustained this. What you should look at is the core should sustain the efforts, all these strategies we have put in place. And I want to assure Nigerians that there's no going back on them. The issue of aged trucks, they must leave the road by next year. On large containers, we've sustained these efforts. The most important thing is that we must not put our eyes off it. Then the issue of speed limiting device on commercial vehicles, these are fundamental issues. That was one of the first things Mr. President approved when he came on board. That was the first thing approved because he's an apostle of road safety, and he has been monitoring this. And the other issue, the issue of sales of drugs and alcohol, we further compel the local government to ban this. All the 774 local governments must make the bylaws. Then the critical one we are battling with now is the issue of markets along the highways. The crash that occurred at Akumba, in which the driver lost control, brake failure, and crushed people, in which about 16 people died. This was also another challenge. The resolution of the National Council on Works is that all markets must leave the right of way. And we are going to work on this with the various federal controllers of works and give the ultimatum for them. Ditto, the state governments too must enforce the relocation of all the markets by the roadsides. It's causing, apart from traffic challenges, the threat to safety of lives and properties is a fundamental issue we must address. The first quarter of 2021 is loaded with a lot of enforcements and activities of the Corps. This, I want to assure that we are up to the task.
You still have to say about that 2021 going forward, but before we get to that one, each time you've talked about these road crashes, you've talked about commercial vehicles, articulated vehicles, and from those figures that we gave earlier, the first quarter and the second quarter, what's the percentage involvement of private vehicles?
Well, for private vehicles, I cannot calculate it now. It's not as high. But during the Yuletide season like this, that is when we have more private vehicles involved in road traffic crashes. For the normal routine periods, there's not much problem involving private vehicles. Why? During the Yuletide season is because a lot of private vehicles are put on the road. Most private drivers are not used to long-distance driving. They are not used to fatigue sets in.
Just
in urban areas, you drive for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
3 minutes, then you get a traffic light, school runs. But on the highways, the private drivers, so the last year I raised this issue, more private vehicles were involved in crashes than commercial. And that is why we've raised the level of campaign that even if you want to travel, you can go to some of these professional offices where you can get drivers. The court to also offer to assist with drivers for a fee.
Let me quickly squeeze this in before we sign out on this segment. The decade of action ends this year, 2011 to 2020. What's the level of our success in this quarter, and what do we do going forward?
The first UN decade of action for road safety 2011 to 2020 ended on the 11th of May 2020. Then on the 18th of August, the UN General Assembly also endorsed the second UN decade of action 2021 to 2030. I think Nigeria has submitted its report. I think we've been able to achieve a lot of things. And when you look at it, the question is, globally, there's a problem. At the beginning of the UN decade of action in 2011, the baseline for fatalities was 1.2 million globally, not in Nigeria. By the time we finished the UN decade of action, the fatalities has increased to 1.35 million globally. So Nigeria has also taken its own share from this. So the issue is that what I can say as per Nigeria is that at the 3 tiers of government, the level of awareness of road traffic administration and management has been raised to the highest level, to the extent that the Vice President of Federal Republic of Nigeria is the chairman of the National Road Safety Advisory Council. If there has not been the government intervention in the last decade, the last 10 years, this will not be the story. I can tell you the level of government intervention has saved so many lives as per the efforts of member nations in respect of this. And the government, again, as per the UN conventions that are related to road safety, Mr. President has ceded to all this, and they were all deposited on the 27th of October 2018. These are all we've done well as a nation, and even other African countries are emulating Nigeria, but we can still do more. And the government is doing more now, the intervention fund being provided now to further see to the fact that the road traffic crashes is brought to an acceptable level. We just have to sustain this campaign. We have to sustain this enforcement. We have to sustain more initiatives in bringing down the road traffic crashes.
All right, then we do thank you for your time and all the best.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Right. Thank you. Well, back in a moment. Join us again.